This is J. Krishnamurti's public talk in Rome, 1972.
I think it would be best that we understand each other. First of all, this is not an entertainment, neither intellectual or emotional form of amusement. We are trying to express something in words that demands serious attention. And we are not bringing something from India, some exotic religion or thought, or some mysterious nonsense. But together this morning, if we may, consider the world as it is. Because the world is you, and you are the world. The culture, the economic, the religious culture has conditioned you, as it has conditioned the people in India and Asia. And so, you are the world, and the world is you. There is no question or doubt about that. That's a fact. You're born in this country, conditioned by the culture in which you have lived, economic, social, environmental, religious, and you're part of that. And you have created the world as it is. And we have to see that fact, not as an idea, not as an intellectual concept, but as a factual, everyday activity. I think most of us see this fairly clearly. And to bring about a radical revolution is necessary. Because the world, as it is in utter chaos, contradictory, divided, fragmented. Religions have divided people, and so also nationalities. This division of nations has brought about wars. And so one sees actually in the world as it is today that where there is division, both outwardly and inwardly, there must be conflict. I think, too, this is fairly clear, that where there is a contradiction, a division, a separation, a fragmentation, there must be, at various levels of our thinking, of our consciousness, conflict, struggle. And where there is this division, there must be also violence. And this has produced an insane world. This is fairly clear when you look at it objectively. And this problem exists everywhere, in the Far East, in the Middle East, and in the West. The conflict between the poor and the rich, the racial division, and so on. This division not only exists outside of us, outside of our skin, but also within us, inside of us. In ourselves, we are contradictory. In ourselves, we are fragmented. Our behavior outwardly is one thing, and our behavior with our family is another, and our behavior in ourselves is quite a different thing. So there is outward fragmentation and inward fragmentation. And no politician, no priest, no businessman or economist is going to solve this problem, except you. Because you have produced this world, this insane, mad, conflicting world in which there is so much sorrow, so much poverty, hunger, war, brutality, violence. And we are responsible for it, each one. And we cannot possibly leave it to others to bring about a psychological revolution which alone can transform and bring about a sane, rational world. I think most of us realize this, at least at moments of sanity, when you are thinking objectively and seeing the whole world, what's going on. And we hope by some miracle, by some chance, by some accident, things will be transformed. And they are never transformed. I'm afraid the loudspeaker is off. And I don't think we realize what are the implications of this. And we are too lazy or perhaps indifferent to resolve these problems that exist around us and within us. And observing all this, whether you're in Australia, Japan, or in America, or anywhere else, observing all this, one asks, what is one to do? What is the action that will not be contradictory, that will not breed further problems, that will not bring about further misery to man? Is there an action which is total, which is whole and never contradictory, both outwardly and inwardly? And this morning, if we may, we are going to consider together such action. Communication is very important. That is, communication implies thinking together. Working together, investigating together. And therefore, it's a question, not that you merely listen to the speaker, either accepting or denying what he says, but rather inquiring together, sharing together our inquiry, our investigation into this whole problem of existence, in which is involved love, death, and the inquiry into truth. That is the whole of our existence. The work, the daily work, the relationship between our human beings, the implication and the meaning and the significance of what love is, and this terrible thing that's called death, of which one is frightened. And also to inquire together into this whole question of meditation, and to come upon something that is not measured by thought, that is beyond time. That is the whole significance of living. Relationship, love and death and meditation, and if there is something beyond all this. And if we may, this morning, we're going to go into it. Therefore, one has to be serious. And it's very difficult in a country like this, with our blue skies and lovely trees and all the rest of it, to be totally, completely serious. First of all, one has to look at one's own life. Because what we are trying to do, or trying to investigate and therefore act, such an action will bring about a psychological revolution. And that revolution is absolutely necessary in a mad world, in a world that's so utterly corrupt, insane. So if one is serious, then we can inquire. And seriousness means inquiry with freedom. One cannot possibly inquire if the mind is not free to observe. And it is not free to observe when it is conditioned. When there is any form of resistance, when there are opinions, judgments, evaluations, then you cannot possibly inquire. As a good, efficient, first-class scientist, if he is not free, he cannot possibly discover anything new, open, and go into the field of the unknown. So, if you are serious, your responsibility is, out of freedom, to inquire. Therefore, together this morning, we're going to inquire, and perhaps in that inquiry bring about in ourselves radical revolution. Inquiry means observation, to observe. And we cannot possibly observe if we have a conclusion of any kind. That is, if you have an opinion, a belief, a theory, then that theory, belief, conclusion prevents observation. And therefore, inquiry ceases. And a mind that is inquiring into this whole problem of existence, not according to the Catholics or the Protestants or the Communists or to any other system, but a free mind having its own responsibility, has to look not only at the outside world, but the world in which inwardly we live, the secret world of our lives, which is conditioned both by the outer and the life that we lead inner. And so a mind that wishes, that is intent, that is serious, must be free to look. So one must look at our life, our daily life. And the mind refuses generally to observe because it doesn't know what to do. It can look. It can see very clearly how contradictory one is, how fragmented we are in ourselves. We know that. We intellectually accept it. But the intellectual acceptance doesn't bring about an action. Intellectual perception can invent a theory. But such perception is not total action. I can see into myself very clearly if I am or am not contradictory. The me and the you. The me with all its complex demands, urges, sorrows, the urge to be competitive and so on. And you with your compulsive urges. The mind can look and see very clearly these fragments of which we are. But such perception doesn't bring about total action. And what does? Because there must be action. Our house is on fire, which is not melodramatic or depressive statement. It is a fact. There are wars, violence, brutality, irresponsible activities on the part of the politicians, the priests, and the so-called leaders. And our mind is used to accept authority. Not only the outside authority, but we have our own peculiar authorities, secret authorities. And we are more apt to follow rather than investigate into the whole question of authority. There must be the authority of the law. And that's the only authority. There is no other authority. Neither the authority of the priest, nor your own authority of experience, of knowledge. Because then when you accept authority inwardly, then you are merely following. Therefore you become mechanical. So we are asking, is there an action which is so complete, in which there are no regrets, no contradiction, an action that is total? Never an action in which there is fragmentation. To find out such an action, as we said, one has to look at the whole of life. Not only our own life, but the life of another, the life of relationship, the way of our conduct. Because meditation is the natural outcome of our daily life. Meditation isn't something imposed on life, on our daily life. Meditation isn't something that a teacher can offer you, a guru. But in the understanding of our daily life, in finding out for ourselves an action that is whole, complete, and non-fragmented. Out of that comes meditation. So our life, as we see it, is a series of struggles, a series of conflicts, confusion, misery, and all the rest of it. In that field, can there be action? Can you, a human being, who have put aside all the stupidities of nationality, all the absurdities of organized religions, can you observe yourself as a non-fragmented human being? And as one cannot, one asks, what brings about fragmentation? I hope we are following each other, are we? I hope we are communicating each other, sharing this question with each other. Because you're not merely just listening to a few words, but we are sharing together this problem. Therefore, you are paying real attention to find out what brings about fragmentation. You know what I mean by fragmentation? Different forms of urges, different demands, contradictory desires, contradictory pursuits. The division between the intellect and the emotion. The division between the conscious and the unconscious. The division between the businessman and the artist, between the politician and the priest. This constant division between the rich and the poor, and so on and so on. What brings about this division, this fragmentation? You do not know. If you ever ask that question of yourself, if you have, what's the answer? Why is there this division between the conscious and the deeper layers of the conscious, of that consciousness? Why is there this division between you and me? In the inquiry of this question, one observes the factor of thought. Because that's the only instrument, apparently, we have of inquiry. That is, we use thought to inquire. And thought is the response of memory, experience, and knowledge, which is the past. So, thought is the very factor of division. Are we meeting with each other? Thought, which is the response of memory, response of our past, thought is never free. Thought is never new. Thought has its function. But in the inquiry of an action that is whole, when thought seeks out an answer, then that very answer must be fragmented, because thought is of the past. Away. Bene. Please. We are together trying to find out what is the responsibility of thought, where it must function logically, sanely, healthily, and where it cannot act, and it can only act in fragmentation. Are we following any of this? It doesn't matter. If you don't, you don't. But if you will give your attention, that means your care. Where there is care, there is affection. There is the urge to find out. And that's what we are trying to do this morning. As we were saying, thought is the very central factor of division. Thought has created the organized religions and beliefs. Thought has created nationalities in its desire to be secure, to find security, both religiously, economically, politically, in every way. Thought cannot function without complete security. So thought is always seeking security. And thought, as we said, is the past, is the outcome of the past, of our conditioning, of our experience, of our knowledge. So thought is the very root of fragmentation. And when we inquire with thought into this whole problem, then we are only inquiring with a fragment. And therefore our answer will be always fragmentary, and action will also be fragmentary. When one sees this very clearly, then can you observe without the interference of thought? That is, can you observe the world as it is, the factual world, the world of brutality, sorrow, the world in which there is so much poverty, hunger, a world of violence, can you observe without a conclusion, or observe with a conclusion? Just to observe. Then such observation is total. That is, in our relationship with each other, we have created images about each other. You have an image about your wife or your husband or your girlfriend and so on. These images have been created by thought. If you have lived with him or with her for many years, naturally, through daily life of pleasantness, unpleasantness, pleasure, sex, and all the rest of it, you have inevitably created an image about her and she about you. These images are the product of thought. And these images bring about division in relationship. There is only a relationship between two images. And that image is the product of continued movement of thought. So can you observe without the movement of thought? And only then you see the whole of life as a unitary movement, not a fragmentary movement. So from that observation, there is an action which is totally complete, non-contradictory. And to look at our life, life being our daily life, with all its pettiness, its absurdities, its vanities, its pursuit of pleasure, and with all its various fears. Can you observe it? Without any sense of condemnation or judgment, or without any opinion, just to observe. Then if you can so observe, you will see for yourself very clearly that there is an action which is not the product of thought. It is the action of insight and perception. You know, the word theory means insight. You may have an insight into something. You may see the inward nature of something. But when you have an insight into something, you draw a conclusion from that insight. Please follow this little bit. You draw a conclusion from that insight. And that conclusion prevents further insight. Naturally, if I conclude, have an opinion, a judgment from that insight, that acts as a black block from further insight. So to have an insight without a conclusion, and insight means action. Can we observe our life without a conclusion? Because it is these conclusions that divide people. It's these conclusions and images that destroy relationship between people. And so a mind that is free from any image, any conclusion, comes upon that strange thing called love. Now, for most of us, love has become a pleasure. For most of us, love is something sexual, sensational, and the pursuit of that thing which we call pleasure. And when you observe very closely, pleasure is the product of thought, as fear is. We have divided again pleasure and fear. And the pursuit of pleasure, which most of us are caught in, is the insistence of thought on its own, with its own desires, with its own concern. I do not know if you have ever gone into this question of pleasure. We're not saying we should not have pleasure. But we are inquiring, we're asking, what is pleasure? Why does man, in different forms, pursue this thing so endlessly, consciously, unconsciously, secretly, and openly? What is this thing? And the ultimate pleasure is not only sexual, but the supreme pleasure is to find what you call reality, God. And pleasure expresses itself in so many thousand ways. And when that pleasure is denied, there is anger, violence, brutality, and obviously fear. So one must understand this question of pleasure and fear, which is part of our daily life. Have you ever found out for yourself why the mind is constantly insisting, pursuing, demanding pleasure? You know, pleasure is entirely different from joy. Joy you cannot invite, whereas pleasure you can. Enjoyment is not pleasure. to enjoy a beautiful sunset, to enjoy the light of the heavens on a leaf, to enjoy this clear, beautiful blue sky. But once you have enjoyed the clear, beautiful sky, thought comes in and says, I must have more of it. The demanding of the more is thought. And where thought operates, there must also be fear. Fear of what might happen tomorrow. What might happen is the supposition of thought. So it is very important to understand the whole structure and nature of thinking, and to observe the movement of thought as you would observe a bird on the wing. Just to observe it, watch it. And you can only watch it without the watcher. You understand this? The watcher is the image of the past. The watcher is the conclusion. And the watcher, when he watches, cannot observe or only observes through the eyes of the past. And therefore there is a division between the observed and the observer. Do you get all this? So can you observe this whole movement of thought, pleasure, fear, which are essentially fragmentary, without any resistance? Resistance and the action of will is the me, the I, the ego. That resistance is the factor of division. Look, sir, can you listen to what is being said with great attention and care, without any resistance, which doesn't mean that you accept or deny, just to listen. If you so listen, without any agreement or denial, that very act of listening brings about a response from the unconscious. Because you know, the conscious mind, with all its daily activity, is so concerned with its outward security that it's incapable of being free of resistance, whereas the unconscious, the deeper layers, is more subtle, more sensitive. I do not know if you have noticed all this. You don't have to go to an analyst to find out about all this. So the question is now, can there be a transformation, radical transformation in our behavior, in our relationship with each other, And that's only possible where there is no image, no resistance, but always observation, without any conclusion. And such observation is total action. Of course, one can't go into great many details, but we haven't the time. So we must come next to the question which we said, love is not pleasure, love is not desire. And to understand that quality of love, one must understand also what is death. You know, most of us are frightened of death. The older we get, the more scared we are. The more we put it off. We put it as far away as possible from us. That is, to us, living is within the field of the known. And death is something totally unknown. So rather live with the known and therefore be afraid of the unknown. And thought has put death far away. But it is always there. It happens to all of us. Perhaps tomorrow, or 10 years, or 100 years later. It is there. Time cannot divide it. It is there. But thought, as time divides it. Because thought is time. Thought is the product of a brain which has evolved through time, accumulated knowledge, experience through time. And thought can only function in time, as yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So thought is time. So thought, say, living in time cannot face that which is the end of time, which is death. And death may come through disease, natural old age, accident, and the way we live, the daily way of struggle, conflict, strain, must inevitably bring that thing which we call death. So, can we understand, not intellectually, not verbally, the state of mind that is without time? Do you understand? I wish I could go on. I will go on. It doesn't matter. See, we have divided living from dying. And living is within the field of time. And death to us is the end of living in time. So our mind is concerned greatly with time. Not only with the chronological time, by the watch, by the year and so on, but by the psychological time. And death is the ending of life of the time known to the brain as living. And we never inquire what this living is. This living is pain, sorrow, pleasure, all the turmoil. And the ending of that is death and the fear of death. So, can the mind live a life psychologically without the tomorrow? That means living with death. It doesn't mean committing suicide. That is, not dividing living from dying. You can only live if you are dying every day to everything known. Psychologically. But if you separate living from dying, then there is fear. Then all the complexities of a mind that's constantly seeking security. The brain must have security, otherwise it cannot function efficiently, objectively. It must have complete security. But it cannot have that security if it is not enough food, if it hasn't a house, a shelter, if it has got to battle all the rest of one's life. And that's why, seeing the world as it is, there must be psychological revolution. And that's your responsibility. Because you are the world. And the world is you. If you don't change radically, no politician, no priest, no economics environment is going to bring about this tremendous change that is so absolutely necessary. And living a life in which there is no contradiction, no fragmentation between love, death, and the everyday living. From that naturally comes meditation. You know, there are so many schools of meditation. So many gurus teaching, or teachers, teaching methods, systems, practices. It's the greatest form of absurdity that is going around the world, that you must practice in order to meditate. Practice a system. Practice a method laid down by some absurd guru or teacher, especially if they are from the Orient. And they promise you, if you do these practices, that you will reach enlightenment, that your life will be radically changed. See how they have put the thing wrongly. That your life, if there is not a harmony, a life in which there is no division, from that grows, like a flower, the beauty of meditation. But to impose on a confused, conflicting, contradictory life a system of meditation which you hope will bring peace in your life, it is putting the horse before the cart. It's absurd. Totally, I can't find words for it. So, meditation comes only to a life that is totally harmonious. And that meditation means a mind that's completely still. And the stillness is not cultivated. It cannot be manufactured by thought. It comes naturally, sweetly, without any effort, if you know, if you have understood clearly how to observe without the interference of an image, a conclusion, an opinion. Then the mind becomes extraordinarily still. Now, the mind can go much further. It's like opening a door to something totally unknown. But to come to that door, you must understand yourself completely. And in the very understanding of yourself, there comes this harmony. And when you come to that door, what lies beyond can never be put into words. What is nameable, what can be put into words is not the real. What is described is not the describable. So the mind that can live totally, that means with love, with compassion, a mind that doesn't divide death, love, and living. It's only to such a mind there can be this tremendous quiet, harmony, beauty, and love. Do you want to ask questions? Or is that enough? You know, you should ask questions. Not only of the speaker, but of yourselves. Questions about your government, your religious structure, the hierarchical attitude towards life. Questions about poverty, serious, fundamental questions. How to put totally an end to war. And to ask such serious questions and to find the right answer, you must be serious, and you must also know the right question. And therefore, to ask a right question, there must be great doubt. You must have doubt about everything, your life, your way of conduct, your social economic structure, your social morality is immoral. You must ask questions, find out. But also, doubt must be held on a leash. You must know when to let go and when to hold it. And that's part of love. So if you have such a question, prego, non capisco. Dica parole inglese o italiano, ma lentamente. Bene, avanti. Brevemente, per favore.
La frammentazione della nostra vita dipende soprattutto dipende appunto da una famiglia, da uno Stato che in un certo modo non è così molto.
Bene. If I understand the question rightly, please correct it. We depend. We depend on our family, depend on a friend, depend on the government, on our jobs, and so on. Dependence, he says, may be one of the factors of fragmentation. Right, sir? That's the question, isn't it? That's right. What is dependence? What do you mean by that word depend? You depend on the postman. You depend on a bus. You depend on so many things outwardly. Psychologically, you depend too. You depend on your wife or your friend or a companion. Because why do you depend psychologically, inwardly? Isn't it because we are afraid to be alone? You know, there is a difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is the factor of our daily life. We are active in our self-interest. We are concerned about ourselves, thinking about ourselves, pursuing our own pleasures, our own ambitions. So that activity is gradually isolating you. isolating you from others, isolating you from your family, from your friends, cutting you off, building a wall around yourself. And your relationship with another is over the wall, not without a wall. So, isolation and the fear of isolation makes one depend. Whereas, if there is no resistance, that means no image between you and another psychologically, there is no question of dependence at all. You follow this? Have I made the question fairly clear?
Perché lei ha detto solo psicologicamente, infatti, materialmente no. L'uomo ha troppi bisogni, fame, sonno, sesso. Quindi questo, dice lei, è tanto vero, ma solo psicologicamente.
Bene, capito. I understand. He says, the questioner says, you've only laid emphasis on the psychological revolution. But man needs food, clothes, and shelter. Why don't you lay emphasis on that and not on this? Right, sir? That's the question, isn't it? The moralless. Look, man must have food, clothes, and shelter. That is his right. Right through the world. Not just few people who have food, clothes, and shelter. Everybody must have it. And it is the function of right government to produce it. For everybody, not just for few Italians or few English or few Russians. There's the whole country that's starving. 1 meal a day, you don't know anything about all that. Now, how can we bring about food, clothes, and shelter to everybody? Will governments as they are do it? Will the politicians, will the businessmen, will the economists? Because they don't think in those terms of everybody. And this is not possible as long as you have nationalities, right? As long as you're spending enormous sums on armaments. As long as you are seeking your own personal security in the name of the nation and all the rest of it. So, to bring about an outward change, radical change outwardly, you must change inwardly. You have tried the other way. There have been world revolutions. And they have not given food to everybody. On the contrary, there is a tremendous tyranny of bureaucracy and dictators. So, one sees clearly that the world needs food, clothes, and shelter, not for the few, for thousands and millions of people who have not got it, who have been brought up in it. And to bring about that, there must be psychological revolution in each one. Bene. Un momento, per favore. No, Madam, écoutez, don't make the question too long because...
How does one get to that source whereby the unconscious and the conscious are one?
How do you understand? Much simpler. The questioner asks, how do you bring about complete harmony between the conscious and the unconscious? That's the right, isn't it, madam? Will you please listen to this? First of all, we must find out how to negate what is not true. Analysis will not bring about this harmony. Right? Analysis implies division between the analyzer and the analyzed. So, analysis in any form will not bring about this harmony. So, following this, you see the logic of it, the reason of it, because analysis implies time. Analysis implies the division between the analyzer and the analyzed. And if he is capable of analyzing himself or be analyzed by a professional who also needs to be analyzed, if you can analyze, then each analysis must be total and complete. And that's not possible. And to analyze implies a series of days, months, years, which means time. And in the meantime, you're acting mischievously. You're contradictory in the meantime. Therefore, analysis is not the way to bring about harmony. Right? Can the mind negate analysis? Therefore, you are free from analysis. Therefore, the mind has removed from itself this burden of that which is false, this sense of analyzing oneself endlessly. So the mind is free. And this division between the conscious and the unconscious, why does it exist at all? Is it, I'm questioning, I'm not saying it is it because the conscious mind is occupied so endlessly with everyday living? The conscious mind is a mechanical mind. Goes to the office, factory, cooking, the daily routine, which has become so terribly mechanical. And the unconscious or deeper layers of the mind is not mechanical. It's much more subtle, much more swift, much more capable. sensitive. And what is the unconscious? The unconscious, the deeper layers, are all the past experiences, knowledge, the racial family storehouse. You can observe all this yourselves. And the deeper layers give you intimation of something more than the mechanical process of living, either through dreams or when the mind is fairly quiet. So the mind, if you want to go into it very deeply, the mind, when there is division between the conscious and the deeper layers, must bring about disorder. Because there is no harmony. Harmony implies order, complete order, physical, emotional, intellectual order, which means harmony. And where there is division, there is no harmony. To see this fact, that analysis does not bring about harmony, dreams with their intimations do not. They may explain, they may give an intimation. But dreams are a continuation in a different form of our daily living. So dreams, analysis, will not bring about harmony. So through negation of what is disharmonious, through negation of what is disorder, there is harmony. After all, order is security. The brain needs order. It may find order in some neurotic belief. It may find order in some mystical nonsense. It may find order in an experience, in a vision, in a belief. But such order, such belief, such various forms of drugs and all the rest of it must inevitably bring disorder. So the brain needs order, complete order. And that is only possible when you understand the whole structure and inward nature of yourself, to know yourself completely. And out of that comes strange and marvelous harmony and fullness and all the rest of it. What's that? What's that? Coming back to oneself, doesn't one need guidance, discipline? You know, the word discipline means to learn. Un momento, per favore. Huh? What, sir? I'm replying to that question, sir. You see, each one of us is occupied with his own question, with his own problem, and we won't listen to somebody else. That gentleman asked a question. He said, mustn't one have discipline, a direction? And we are examining that. We said the word discipline in English and in Latin and so on means to learn. If you have listened this morning, the very listening was a discipline, wasn't it? The very listening, learning, demanded its own order, didn't it? So if you have an external discipline, you understand? A discipline, a guide, then there is a division between the discipline, the pattern which you have set out for yourself, and the actual state of your own being. You understand, sir? Look, if you have an ideal, which is the directive, and you discipline according to that ideal, what takes place? You say to yourself, you must not be angry, you must be peaceful, or whatever it is. You have set that ideal. So there is a contradiction between the fact and the idea. Right? So there is conflict between the actual and what should be. Then why do you bother with what should be? Why don't you deal with what is? Which is your passion, your ugliness, your pettiness, your jealousy, whatever it is. In the understanding of what is, in itself, order comes, which is the learning. Learning from what is its own discipline. You learn. When we refuse to learn, then authority from the outside is imposed on you. When we refuse to clear in ourselves disorder and therefore produce disorder outwardly, then dictatorship in different forms come into being, authority, which you have produced out of your disorder. I think that's enough for today.